one of the leading voices of sustainable work around the world and a co-creator of the original and much lauded Silo restaurant, something I did not know, but this man actually built Silo in Australia before Silo moved to the UK. You did not know that either. There you go. Matt's careers in kitchen spans decades of grappling with the difficult question of how to feed people with minimal impact on the planet. Today, he speaks of that minimal impact and of sustainability, but of a different kind, a sustainability of a different planet, the planet of the mind. Let's give this man a warm welcome of applausers. This chat will also include our good friend Darren. I feel like this chair is going to go at some point in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I'm just going to start straight out without any pleasantries there. But we know of your work, brilliant work, mind you, in the area of sustainability in the kitchen with food. And this is a much discussed conversation there. We're always talking about minimal impact, upcycling, and all of those bits that are about saving the planet. And there was a comment, a really poignant comment actually, that Kurt made just a second ago about how in the process of trying to be sustainable, that sometimes you end up doing things that are not necessarily sustainable for yourself.
Levels of sustainability, it's a huge thing. We as cooks intuitively, we work too much, we probably stay up too late, probably drink too much. We're in an environment where we're surrounded by demons, it's so easy to fall into a rabbit hole. And through doing sustainable restaurants, the Greenhouse back in the day in Perth, we did that restaurant in Melbourne and Sydney as well. With all of the efforts of just trying to be better. We don't have the solutions, we don't have the answers, but all we can do is try. So by running waste-free restaurants, it's a tremendous challenge. It's a minefield of how do I get a raspberry that's not in a punnet? How do I get milk that's not in a jug? So we developed a whole bunch of systems, and through that process, the idea of why can't a restaurant not have waste? Historically, if you go back and back and back, waste isn't a thing. We create waste. So we wanted to create a restaurant that didn't do that and didn't have that environmental impact, and through that came so many challenges of, we had to, create new milk systems so we could, get coffee from vats, so they went back and forth from the dairy, etc. And a lot of stuff we do intuitively, instead of taking a plastic bag, use a plastic crate. The smallest things actually make a big difference. Sustainability can be so overwhelming, and I get asked so often, how can I be more sustainable? But it's just the smallest things, like carry a coffee cup. Or if you don't have time for a coffee to sit down, you just don't have one. Or having a water bottle with you, the smallest little things. And then you find yourself in a rabbit hole of one thing, then you do one more thing. Maybe you grow a pot of parsley, so then you've got a more delicious herb, but it's not coming in a plastic wrapper. And it's, it's lively and it's pleasant, it's more enjoyable. So we opened the world's first waste-free restaurant, Silo, in Melbourne, which was a neighbourhood cafe, essentially. We kept it very simple. Douglas was our first head chef, did a fantastic job, and obviously now has extended that, evidently, to a whole other level in the UK, which is amazing. But starting off really small, serving coffees, making sandwiches, milling grain to make flour, to make the bread, to make the sandwich. So we had a really humble approach to it. And then through that process, we thought, what can we do more in terms of food waste? So then we turned Silo into a restaurant called Brothel. Pretty funny to say you're going to work at the brothel, but and we're serving bone broths. And instead of buying in other ingredients, we were using other restaurants' waste. So Neil Perry, who's a hero of mine, a really iconic Australian cook, at that time had a restaurant called Rockpool, a steak restaurant. So we had access to the best bones. So we'd get bones in and we'd make nutrient-dense broth. We'd use marron shells from Attica. So we went to our friends in the best restaurants around town to collaborate with us so we could all be doing better. Unfortunately, we ran into a lot of issues with that restaurant. Financially, it wasn't overly sustainable, to be really honest. And the biggest issue we faced was lack of support from local councils. So instead of having garbage bins, we had a closed-loop composting machine that sat in the laneway where the rubbish bins would normally be, which meant we felt we didn't have to pay the fee for waste removal, which ended up with us in court with Melbourne City Council, and we closed the restaurant. So, there's there's so many things you can think you can get done, but there's so many levels of how you can get this stuff done, and it becomes exhausting, it becomes taxing, and financially you get to a point where you just kind of have to stop. And through that process, we've done a whole bunch of other projects since, and I really love the fact that Douglas has really picked it up and run with it and turned what started off as a little cafe into a fantastic high-end dining experience, and showing people that you can eat sustainably at that level is, for me, phenomenal.
As we've just discussed this, now we start to approach the bit of financial sustainability, and there are many others, right? And today we'll talk about cultural sustainability. We have in some regards with a couple of our chats, but an area that doesn't get covered very often is the area that kind of powers all of this intelligence, which is our heads, right? And the question then needs asking, that how can we operate as chefs and as people with a little bit more mindfulness and mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to Australia because that's where I'm from and that's where I cook, but I feel we're a real generation of change. We're a generation of shift. I was brought up through the days of working excessive hours, getting paid very little. The idea of asking someone, how are you, actually, like sincerely, just didn't happen. It was like, hurry up, where's this? We didn't have that care factor, so I think it's a really nice thing to see this change and to look after people. And as chefs, as restaurateurs, most of my job is managing people. Across our venues, we have about 70 staff, and no one person's the same. Some people react better to being a little bit beasted. Some people react better to, checking in, a bit more time off, all of these things. So people managing is a hell of a skill, and I learn more and more every day from doing this thing, from managing people. So it's ever changing, but I think our industry has changed a hell of a lot for the better. If chefs are going to stay around longer, chefs are going to be better, chefs are going to be more sustainable because they have time to think about stuff, they have time to rest, they have time to be creative. So I think the shift has been a really important one because, the industry was getting to a point where people just weren't joining it because of that reason of working too much, not earning any money. And now as a cook, we have every opportunity. You can have a television show, you can have, partners that can invest to build your dream restaurant. You get to come to Singapore and talk to people. The opportunities for a cook now are as greater than as any other industry. And that didn't really used to be the case for a select few, but not everyone. So it's definitely been a change for the positive, but also with that change, sustainability in terms of wage costs and food costs have changed as well. So yes, it's better and it's more positive, but then, I feel as consumers, we need to realistically think about food's going to cost a little bit more in restaurants because we run such tight margins and I ain't making money. I don't know about you, but it's a tough one. So it's a really fine line to manage that for sure.
I'd like to just peek in a little bit here. What was that defining moment for you? Because I'm always curious. We talk to a lot of chefs, and and we always speak about this looming sort of dark cloud that sits on all of us, and how we're just trying to blow it all away in terms of how do our guys in the kitchen just be better by feeling better, and you can't separate like for us, I think work and home or work and personal is it's really a blurred line just because what we do is something that we enjoy and that we're invested in it. But for you, what was that sort of defining epiphany moment when you said okay, this people that I'm leading now should go through this revelation that I have as well?
I think it's I treat people how I'd like to be treated, and I in my early years in the kitchens I wasn't treated very nicely, and it's just a fact, you'd be verbally abused, physically abused, all of these kind of things, and it made me feel shit. And now as a leader, I don't want my staff to feel that way. So it's a thing of I want people to feel comfortable, I want people to feel happy, have a creative space where they can be positive, where they can be their best. So I guess it's that real shift in change now of just looking after people.
So that's really interesting, right? Because, okay, so I was treated the same way in most of the kitchens I worked in, but I carried that on. And when we first opened the restaurant, that was how I thought if you wanted to perform at the highest level, that was the way you needed to be. That was the language you used, that was the the intensity, and I muddled the idea of being focused with the idea of being sometimes, and I'm ashamed to say this, but being cruel, right? But there was a moment for me when I said, okay, you know what, Darren, this is enough. But like, what was that for you?
Well, I guess I had my first head chef job when I was 21, and at that time I'd just come out of fine dining, the best restaurant in Perth in Western Australia, working those crazy hours, and it was my first time. I went from being a sous chef there to being a head chef for the first time, and I just said to myself, I was like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to treat people like that. I want people to be respected, looked after, encouraged, to be creative. And I just said to myself, and of course there's moments, like there's always moments where you have that bit of rage, but one thing that really helps me deal with that is 5 minutes can change a lot. If someone's doing something and it's really irritating you, and instead of me previously, or back in the day, you'd be like, get aggressive, and why are you doing that, carrying on. And now I kind of really, when these situations arise, I just tell myself I've either got to walk out of the kitchen and have a think about stuff, or how am I going to approach this. But 5-minute little intervals can change your mindset so much, and take that moment of when you're feeling that rage and that aggression, and particularly when people are fucking up with your money. If someone fillets a fish poorly and you can't serve it, and that fish costs you $150, and you go, what? And instead of flying off the handle, maybe stepping outside, coming back in and saying, okay, cool, so how can we do this better next time? And approaching things this way, and being real and honest of, this fish costs this much money, we're not going to be able to use it now, but how can I help you to do it better next time? So I think just that little break is
That's really interesting, like a paradigm shift in the way you approach it, right? So did you feel like there was a period of deconstruction for you coming out of this fine dining restaurant that you were at and then taking over a new kitchen? Was there like a period of deconstruction? Like, because I don't think, did it happen overnight, or was it like, okay, I gotta do this to be better, or I gotta do this to be better?
It probably didn't happen overnight, but being, in charge of a very big restaurant at that time, and I just kind of had the attitude of, I'm just going to say yes. So I was working with Jos Bakker, who's, the pioneer of sustainability globally, I would honestly say. And he would asked us to do things like milling grain to make flour, to make bread. And I was young, and I was like, I'd never done that. I didn't even know that was a thing. But I just said yes. So we were in a situation where we're having to teach ourselves a lot of new skills, and not just culinary skills, but like management skills, how to look after restaurants, food costs, all of these kind of things. So it just came down to just having a positive attitude of saying, yes, let's just do it, and whilst creating an environment where people could be encouraged and supported. And I want the team to want to be at work. I want them to be happy and enjoy the working environment, because it's such an integral part of our lives, and if you're not enjoying it, so that kind of weighs into my people management of, I want people to be having a good time. And back to, everyone's different. Some people, we've got cooks in our team that are, fathers, and their priorities aren't all just cooking, so I make sure that those people have a Sunday off. Or then I've got young, enthusiastic staff that want to, be the next Rene Redzepi and, go forage some stuff, or pick some stuff, or create some food, so, I can take them into the forest and we can find some stuff. So you just got to work with people differently to get the best out of them, I think.
You touched on the financial component as one that ends up affecting most other components, right? It's really, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, is essentially the quote by Mike Tyson, right? So you open a restaurant and you have these plans and ideas and ideals about how you want to run, and then the moment you start to realize that to be that image of yourself consistently actually has a very material cost also, right?
Absolutely. I mean, doing things sustainably is not cheap at all. You can spend $50 on a roll of Glad Wrap every week, or you could spend $5,000 on buying containers for the next 5 years. So the reward isn't always there immediately. But doing things properly costs money. Having all of the right containers to store your food properly, having the space to do that as well is another thing. And changing the way you think about food. Our restaurants have never seen a roll of Glad Wrap. But it's such a common thing. But that also means, it's really difficult to make a chicken Valentine, so this plays off with the idea of using a whole chicken. And as a chef, you go, cool, I'll debone it and I'll roll it up and I can poach it and I can portion it nicely and it all works. But then when you eliminate those things, it makes you more creative as well. It's because okay, cool, so we can't do that, and that's the obvious way we do things. So you become super creative because you have to be creative out of necessity, really.
And in that context, what is in your mind the material cost of actually trying to operate a restaurant in a different manner, not with food, but with people, you know? But I remember growing up the ranks, and I'm sure your experiences were the same. You're very much a cog, and you need to produce, right? And that has an impact. It's impossible not to. And I think while we're consistently being reminded of our attitudes as leaders and chefs in the kitchen, and you see articles time and time again, very often we forget to make the relationship between financial burden and pressure of a head chef or a chef owner and the impact that that has on the system all the way down. In some regards, cash is king in this conversation too. You mentioned charging more, and people accepting that as a reality, but I don't see that as, I don't think anybody's ready.
Well, no, and it's a really hard one. Like part of this process in Australia, wages have changed dramatically. You know, people are paid for every hour that they work, and they get paid really well, so they can have a nice lifestyle, have a nice home, and all of these things. And it's a real challenge and it's a real frustration because, you know, the global voice is, you know, look after stuff better, use better ingredients, you know, do the right thing ethically. But the market hasn't shifted yet. So it's a really sore point right now. It's really difficult to keep doing the right thing, and that's why I think it's easier to revert back to not doing it. So, you know, it's a challenge, and do I have the answers? Absolutely not. I'm working it out as I go, but it's an ongoing thing, and we'll become more resourceful, and, you know, just try to do the best we can, and hopefully, you know, the economy catches up to where it needs to, because, you know, restaurants it's hard. It's really hard. Like, man, we love it, and, you know, I often think of, like, some days I wake up and go, why are we doing this, you know? But then I also in the next breath go...
I've never had that idea.
Why are we doing this?
But then in the next breath go, I love this. I choose this. This is the life I choose. Like, I choose to be a chef. I choose to be a restaurateur. I choose to do things ethically, you know? So that's on me. And those thoughts of why do I do this are much less than thoughts of being positive about what change we can make.
Have there been maybe success and failures in your story of trying to be a better leader and a better manager of people that you think are worthy of sharing?
Well, I've had restaurants fail, you know, Greenhouse in Perth, we did really well. In our first year, we were best new restaurant, I was best chef in the food guide, all of these accolades. But then, you know, the restaurant financially didn't get there, so it only lasted a couple of years. We brought in partners to help support us, but then that put us more in debt. And, you know, like, failure's massive in our industry. I've failed at heaps of stuff. Like, you know, not just from making a dish that sucked, but to, like, livelihoods of people and having to close restaurants. And it's just the reality, and it's shitty, it sucks. But then the drive and the ambition to be better and to do better and learn from failure keeps me going, basically.
Like to fail better.
Yeah, pretty
You know,
much.
just to fail.
I can be better at failing.
Yeah. No, I think like that's a mantra I think all of us have. I just want to come back to the team organization and things and well, there's a vast difference in the way I run the restaurant now and what I used to do. And one of those key things I found was very pertinent was that it had to seep through the entire organization. Like, everybody had to be in on it, and that means that you almost have to correct in the most gentlest of hands even the bad habits that were brought in from other places as well. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Well, I had a great example recently of having someone in our team, a small team that was toxic, that just didn't gel with the team, was highly skilled, and it was this person that I thought I needed in my team to execute a section of the kitchen that I'm not great at, pastry. But what it did is created, from what we had started to set up, a really encouraging, nurturing environment to really toxic to the point that people don't want to work with them. And then you think you can change that, but sometimes, like, just people don't fit as well. So sometimes, you know, they can be a great chef, but maybe not a great chef for your team. So I think that's a really big thing of how your team work together and encourage each other. And not everyone has to be best mates at all, but, you know, there has to be some level of compassion and people getting along to get the job done the way we want it to be done. So I think, you know, just working with staff, and when this particular situation, I thought we could change it. But it gets to a point where you just have to look at it. And then the fear for me was like, what happens when I lose my pastry chef? And, you know, we're in a skill shortage era. So it's like this thing of like, I need to keep this person to keep this happening. But then the second we made the decision for that person to leave our team, everyone thrived more. And then, you know, I have a first-year apprentice now doing the pastry section under my mentoring. And then so everything works out. eventually. But
Yeah.
it's
Or any worst case scenario, we just sell more creme brulees.
that's right.
We can make creme brulee.
Yeah, that's right.
But I also just wanted to highlight this really beautiful word, compassion and empathy. Which well, you said compassion, but I think of empathy. And how did you let that permeate through your? So what I originally wanted to ask was, how did you let that permeate through the organization? And so it's the first thing that comes to mind, or what I thought I would have done was to do that myself, right? And then so you lead by like some sort of an example, but then for it to permeate through the organization took I think would take very deliberate and very specific steps. What did you do?
It starts from the top. When you're in charge, the way you behave, the way you act, streams down through the whole team, even if you don't realize it. I think leading by example is a really big thing. Caring for people, checking in on people. Just a simple thing of saying hello to every staff member, saying goodbye, saying thank you. Just that you set the standard, and it all starts from the top. So if you aspire to create this kind of environment and lead by example, actions are big. So if you're doing that, it goes down the hill of then it becomes the culture of the restaurant, rather than, if you've got a grumpy head chef carrying on slamming fridge doors, that happens from the sous chef, because the sous chef's trying to do what the head chef does. So it starts from the top. It really does, and it streams down for sure.
The spaces that we grew up in were very much filled with that kind of attitude, right? You always had somebody breathing down your neck, slamming things is the base norm of things. But we've also noticed that the people that we are now in charge of and employing and working alongside have changed tremendously. It's a generational swap there that I think every chef that I know that has my age has been talking about consistently. Is there something to be said about this particular change, and how do you feel about the young chefs that are coming on board? And if anything, if we had any wisdom or advice or things to hear and learn from them, what would those things be?
Well, I think we're going to have another influx of amazing creative ideas, and we run the restaurants the way we do, but then, by encouraging the next generation, the best thing we can do is give the next generation a chance to exceed what we've done. So we're giving them the skills that we know and we can share. But with this different mindset now of not having to work so much, kids have opportunity to study more, to learn more, to be creative, to cook more. So I think we're going to have the next generation of cooks are going to exceed all of us by far, I think. And that's a really nice thing. I think we're getting to a point where there wasn't even going to be a next generation of cooks, because young people stopped coming into the industry for the reasons of working too much, abuse, not getting paid well. But now that's changed, so I think with the next generation we're going to see some amazing innovation for sure.
I have a little quote here to share. We're down to our last few minutes, or a question rather. Could you? Oh, that's the timer right there. I hope. Could you share some practical things that you might have practiced with staff, if any at all, but have there been instances there where you tried games or conversations, heart-to-heart?
No, but working with, the young staff particularly, we have a very young team across the restaurants, and you can make things fun, challenging staff to who can chuck a dozen oysters faster in the service, and in a jovial way. It's not you lost, you suck. It's okay, cool, let's be better. And how do you do it? You do it like that. So you can kind of challenge staff a little bit in a few ways, but that also doesn't work for everyone. So for some, eager young cooks, they love that. But then someone that's not as confident is not going to thrive in that situation. Yeah. So you don't put them in that situation. So it's people managing.
We did that, and then I stabbed my hand. So just bear that in mind, guys.
It's a really, one thing that transpired from everything that we're talking is the more that we're looking at a particular system or, what's the pill?
Yeah,
there isn't one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
saying about interacting with people on a one-on-one basis, saying hello, checking in on the individual, right? And these are not things that you can put within a framework. You actually have to care for the people that you employ.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, empathy is a big thing, and we all have bad days, and that's okay. It's okay to have a bad day, but don't let it define you. So that's where checking in with people to, you know, if someone is having a bad day, they're having, you know, a relationship issue or financial issue or something, being aware of that so you don't trigger them as well, of, you know, maybe don't bring up that topic. So yeah, empathy and caring for people is a really big thing, for sure. Yeah.
Can I just close with the question, with just one last question? And I think there might be people here who would be listening in on this and wondering, like, what could my first step be? And I think there are many answers to this, but like, if you had to weigh in on what that first step would be in just creating like a space that's safe for everyone to work in, what would you think that would be?
Just treat people how you'd like to be treated, you know. It's pretty basic, it's very simple. And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Just be a nice person and just, you know, like...
You mean like we originally should have been? Like
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's the crux of it, really. Just treat people how you like to be treated. It's very basic, it's very simple. And I just think it's the way we need to think these days, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy.